Hey, MJ.
Hey, Dale.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I have MJ Bolt here with me. She's running for state representative in District 4, Position 1. And she's here today to chat with us a little bit about her survey responses and just give us a good idea of who she is and what she's running for. So it's nice to meet you, MJ. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and why you chose to run?
Yeah, you bet. I'm MJ Bolt. As you said, I'm running for state representative in District 4 for Position 1. And I am a mom. I'm a community advocate. I've been a PTA mom. That's really how I got involved. I have two sons that are 25 and 26 right now.
Wow.
I've been on the school board at Central Valley School Board.
Okay.
I've been on the State Board of Education for the last 7 years. I basically got involved with school and education because of my kids, because of mostly my son who has special needs, that has autism. That gave me the opportunity to really work closely with our school administrators, principals, and teachers. And that led me to being on the PTA. That led to working with our district around our homeless youth, students in transitional and homeless situations. And then that led to me creating the Central Valley Council Heart and Hand program, which helps funds those needs for those students and families. And that
awesome.
led to working on the bond and levy, the school bond and levy program. I co-chaired that. And then they asked me to run for school board. I did that, created Greater Valley Support Network because I saw a need to bring our community together around the homeless issues in the Valley. Mm-hmm. It's not as apparent in the Valley as it is downtown Spokane. So we had a lot of need, but we didn't have the same resources that downtown had. So that is a organization. It was zero funded. You know, we just kind of did it, and I co-created that.
Wow.
And it's still meeting today. They meet once a month and they bring people on the front lines that serve people that have the needs, that are homeless or in transitional housing, students, families, and bring resources, churches, feeding programs, other resources together to try to help solve those issues in the Valley because it's unique versus downtown. And so that is just a little bit of who I am and what I've been doing. Like I said, the last 7 years, I was elected as the one of 2 Eastern Washington representatives on the State Board of Education.
Okay.
It's a 16-member board. And so I've been advocating for education for the last 15 years, knowing that our current system is not serving our kids well. For most of our students. Mm-hmm. And with everything that happened the last couple years, I've known our legislators for a long time because of being in these roles and been talking to them, not just our local ones, but our state, other state legislators as well. With everything that's gone on the last 2 years, I had increasing conversations and concerns about other issues besides education. And I had continued conversations with our current representatives and saying, what can we do? What is going on? How is this possible for the governor to have these mandates, that type of thing? And that led to our current representatives asking me, MJ, would you run? When Bob McCaslin decided that he was not going to run for the legislative seat again and run for county auditor, that is what led to them saying, MJ, would you run? So in that, I was, I took that and said, well, I've got to pray about that. That's a big, a big step and a big leap. And so I did. I prayed about it and felt very strongly from God that this was something I was supposed to do. That I was supposed to take my advocacy to that next level, to not just advocate for education, which I know intimately. The dynamics and how it works, but also the other issues affecting our citizens here in the 4th District and across our state, that we've got to change this trend that we're on in our state. So that's a little bit about me and why I'm running.
That's a lot to unpack. You've done a lot. I mean, it's really, really impressive. So talking about your educational history, how have you seen, so you were there for 15 years. So, you have this, let's say 12 to 13 years of let's say, a typical normal trend. You guys are building curricula and so on and so forth. And then we go to 2 to 3 years ago, and we have this huge diversity, equity, and inclusion movement, which is penetrating schools. How did that look on that board? I mean, what was the dynamic of that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And it's a challenging one, I got to be honest. It has looked really good, equity. We've been having this conversation almost since I've been on the board, so almost 7 years. I'd say at least 6 years. And we, had an equity policy and a statement and a lens we've looked through, because we heard from students that felt that they, couldn't thrive in the classroom, like directly from students, right? And based on their skin color, they felt that. And that's concerning. I want every child to feel safe and welcome and able to be all of themselves in every classroom, right? That should be a foundation, that every child feels safe in our schools and therefore able to learn and thrive. And so, and also looking at our test scores and stuff, we said, here's these groups of students, and also because of federal dollars, they, require us to do that, to look at different student groups and how they're performing. So this has been going, on since No Child Left Behind back in Bush Jr. days, right? So this isn't new. So the equity policies, honestly, seemed really good, right? They seemed like the right work. And I've been on board and supporting them. But I gotta say, what I've seen of recent, especially where the critical race theory parts, where you start talking about victims and oppressors and the blame and shame language have come in, all of a sudden now I'm going, oh, whoa, this is a slippery slope that we've got to be very careful about.
Right.
And we need to make a distinction between cultural competency and honoring people's diverse backgrounds, ethnicities, where they come from, their story, their history, and now going into this divisive language where you're talking about, because based on your color of your skin, that you're therefore an oppressor or a victim, not based on anything that's happened in your experience.
Right.
And that's where I think we've gone too far. So honestly, it's taken me back a little bit. I just watched Whose Children Are They? Whose Children Are They? The documentary a couple weeks ago. And it was very hard to watch because I've been a part of these conversations at the state level, and I've seen we're developing policies, right, out of these equity things. And it has seemed really positive to me. And yet seeing the negative, like I said, the slippery slope part of this, I'm honestly appalled because I didn't see that. And I'll admit I didn't. But now seeing that there might have been an alternative agenda attached to these, I'm very concerned. So I think that we need to be thoughtful about this. Going back and just saying we shouldn't teach any of this, I don't think that's accurate. Okay. I do think we need to teach diversity, right? In the true sense of the word. You and I have had different experiences in our life, right?
Right, so and we're the same skin color. Right. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you grew up in a rural part of the United Kingdom, based on the conversation I had with you. So yeah, we have distinctly different backgrounds, but with the same skin color. So again, a lot to unpack. I think you make some very good points, and your experiences, I think, lend a lot more to this than someone like me from the outside looking in. But I would say, so a couple of things. So one of the things that you said is honoring backgrounds. Part of equity would be honoring backgrounds. So we honor all cultures, all races, their backgrounds. And what we're seeing now in the culture is that because of diverse equity inclusion movements, they're tearing down statues of our forefathers, whether or not we agree with them or not. We're seeing now I just read an article where someone at the New York Times had stated that should the George Washington Memorial be renamed or changed? It's to what point and to what end do we say, let's just completely rewrite American history and let's just say none of them existed? all based on the fact that George Washington had slaves, and he did have slaves. And we were warned that it would be a stain on this nation at the inception of our nation, and it has been. However, I think that the blame and, as you said, the blame and shame game doesn't work. And I don't think, personally, in my experience since I've moved to the United States, I don't see institutional racism at all in America. I really don't. In fact, I see the exact opposite. I think it's more inclusive than just about anywhere in the world. And I had an interview with Natalie Poulsen yesterday, and we kind of touched on this issue. And one of the things that I had mentioned to her, she has a biracial child. My wife is biracial. And we were talking about the blame and shame, the oppressor and victim. And in a world where we have institutional racism, I don't think that a victim would marry an oppressor and an oppressor would marry a victim. It just doesn't happen. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't individual instances of racism. There absolutely are, unequivocally, and they're abhorrent. And I think that if you go to anyone or the majority of people and say, this person did XYZ, said XYZ, and clearly it was a racist act, I think 99% of the people would stand up with you in defiance of that act. But broadening these things and putting them into policy and shaming children in schools is so damaging on both ends, because what you're doing instantly is you're creating divisiveness in the classroom. And so the white kid doesn't want to interact with the black kid, and it's just not okay. I saw this really heartwarming. My wife and I were watching Britain's Got Talent the other day, and we saw this heartwarming thing. They invited this ballet dancer. She was a biracial ballet dancer to come onto the show. And so the presenter came in and she said, "Hey, this is who I am." And the girl was just starstruck. And she turned, instead of running and hugging the presenter, she turned around and she hugged her friend who was white. And so my wife and I was sat there and just going, this is just, kids don't see this stuff. Right. They truly don't. And when we start enacting policies like this in the legislature, on the school boards, they start to see it and they start to live it. Yeah. And I'm a firm believer that racism is not bred, it is taught. It is a taught response to by your parents, your grandparents, or whatever it is. Yeah. And so this is something that is obviously near and dear to my heart too, because I hear a lot. I've been called a racist, and I'm like, I'm married to a black woman. She's half black. I mean, I must be the most self-deprecating racist in the history of the earth. So this is something that is really near and dear to me. So I'm glad to see that you are able to look and see, like, hey, there's been something attached to this whole time, and I just didn't see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the things you talk about are very concerning to me. We have to, what is the quote? If we don't know our history, it's doomed to repeat itself. Mm-hmm. We have to honor our history. We have to know what happened. Tearing down statues, I don't believe is the answer. Mm-mm. Yes, we made mistakes, and the grace of God is all about that. I make mistakes every day. I've made mistakes in my past where I thought something sounded really good, and then I, now hindsight, I'm going, oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't see that. I was blinded to some of this. So I lean on grace a whole lot, and we have to as a nation. That doesn't mean we should just pretend like that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Like, we've got to be honest about, slavery, what happened in our states, and what, we were founded, and we're founding fathers. We're not perfect people. Correct. But that doesn't mean we throw it all out. And it doesn't mean we throw out the baby with the bathwater. We have an amazing country that has amazing founding documents that were prayerfully, fought for and considered. And I do believe it is the grace of God that led us there to have those. What we're doing is we're going far away from those. And I think that's what is lending us in this time. And I feel like it's almost being used against us to divide us, and that's where we have to have these very hard, complex conversations. Because I also have had conversations with friends that happen to have a little more melatonin in their, skin than I do, that have said, MJ, I do know what it's like to have to assimilate to white culture. We've had kids. So during COVID, when all of a sudden our schools were shut down, and kids, we're doing this remote learning from home. Some kids did say, I actually learned better from home because I wasn't having to assimilate to white culture. Now, I thought when I heard that answer from them, I don't think they were taught that. I thought it was very genuine. I could be wrong, but I've heard that from friends that of color, that have said, oh yeah, we learned you couldn't talk certain ways. We learned really quick, like if they're an educator, like there were certain ways you could talk or not talk, or certain ways you could do your hair or not do your hair. So I think that's real too, right? Like they really did feel like they had to go through, be this assimilation, if you will. And so we can't shy away from that. That's real. Their experience is real. But going to the length that we are, where now if we're teaching divisiveness, like you said, in this blame and shame, now all you're doing is I talked to a friend of mine the other day that said their daughter, who's in 3rd grade, is afraid to go to school because she's afraid, she's white. She's afraid she's going to say the wrong thing. When we did do some trainings, and I think probably a lot of people have done these type of equity trainings nowadays, and they wanted us to, do the pronouns and do what race we are. And I really struggled with that. And I really appreciated my friend that happens to be Black, that's a colleague on the board with me that I highly respect, amazing man, great friend of mine. And he said, I'm of the human race.
Yeah.
And I said, thank you. Because I think that's what we're all feeling, right? We're all human now. But yeah, we have to be honest about our past, and because we have to make sure we don't repeat the sins of our past. But how do we come together? And I do feel that a lot of this is dividing us. And so I answered that answer because I wanted to be transparent in that I don't want to, I don't think it's all bad. Right. Like the words inclusion. I have a son with special needs.
Yeah.
Inclusion is huge to me. I saw him excluded. And it's painful, and I'm trying to, make a better world for all of our kids. I want every kid to feel included, right? I don't want any kid to feel excluded. So we've got to be honest about that.
Right.
So I think we've just got to have that discernment, right? That godly discernment to be able to decide, okay, this is good and this is positive. We're honoring people and their past and their their backgrounds and their rich culture, right? Like ours is not the only way,
right?
But not going down this other road where now we're tearing now we're tearing down our society.
Right. And that's exactly what's happening. But we also have to be understanding of limits too. So I don't know about your son and his disability, but we have to acknowledge that some kids that have a disability may not be able to play. You may not want them to play basketball with, I'm just going to use quote unquote normal kids, right? Because you don't want them to be harmed in the process. And I think that what I've seen a lot of too is that the I hate saying it because it just sounds so bad, but the normal kids, they want them to come. I've seen so many heartwarming videos where they're like, no, come. And they'll gently play with them. And then it's, coach comes on and it's like, okay, well, we have to train now. But those things are where I think when we talk about inclusion, it's not that, he's going to go and be an athlete, and I'm using a general term here, or at least not in the NBA, but at least he's had that opportunity. He's had that moment. I've seen so many of these where it's like, that's to me, when I look at inclusivity, it's like they included him and they made him understand that we're different, but we're the same.
Yep.
And so I agree with you that, yes, it is important that inclusivity is important, but not at the sake of our values. We cannot forgo our values to include others, especially from a moral perspective and a biblical perspective. And I will say that the Bible is the instruction book for all of these things. These are things that they're not new. These are things that have been going on a long, long time, long before we have been here, and they're probably going to go on long after we're gone. And we are here in the here and now, and can do what we can do to change that. And obviously, that's part of why you're running, is you feel you can really legislate change. And I just think that's fantastic. And I really just Anytime anyone, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, is willing to get on board and is willing to work in this area and going to public office, I applaud them, because it's tough. It is tough, and you know better than I do, but it is tough. And so, but what I will say also is that, and you kind of touched on this when you said that your black friend had said, "I'm of the human race," and I think this divide and conquer doesn't work. Jesus said, "A house divided amongst itself cannot stand." So where are we going?
Right.
If we continue on this trend, where are we going? We've been warned. We've been warned by the creator of everything that a house divided amongst itself cannot stand. So where do we go from here?
Exactly. And I think that brings up a great point, not just, whether we're talking about our skin color, whether we're talking about abilities. I like to call it, abilities, neurotypical, or different abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's better, than special needs. But in thinking about even Democrat and Republican, right? Like they are used against us so often to divide us. I've worked with legislators across the aisles to get policy passed, and that's what we have to do. And so you have to find that common ground. We have to find out what brings us together. What I've been blessed with education is it was pretty nonpartisan, right? Mm-hmm. So it hasn't come up. Now it's come up more because my values, I feel like the policies coming out of Olympia have been more offensive, if you will, to my values and my morals recently. And so I found myself kind of struggling more on this state board of education, where most of my friends probably are more of the liberal, side. And, but ultimately, as legislators, that's what we have to do as policymakers, as leaders in our communities and in our state. We have to find a way to come together and find common ground. And so we have to say, this is about the kids, right? This is about humanity. One of the things that I've seen in our schools is we've taken humanity out of our schools. Like when I listen to kids, when I listen to teachers, it's inhumane. And the policies, I have to say this because I'm passionate about this with education. It's not the people. The people are amazing. I have seen the most amazing people in education. That's why I've actually continued to do this, because I've worked with amazingly passionate people. They have cared for my son in a way that was just so humane, so beautiful. And I continue to see that across the state. Sure, there might be some, in any profession, in any industry, you're going to have a few, bad apples, if you will. But a majority, the people are amazing, but it's the system and it's the policies that are coming out of the state level that are causing, producing what we're seeing. And so that's where we really have to be courageous. We'll take that from Natalie Polson. We have to be courageous to stand up and say, we have to do what's right. We have to do what's right for our kids. We have to do what's right for our citizens, for the people. We want I want to leave a different world for our kids than where we're going right now. I really want to stay here and fight for Washington. I know a lot of people are leaving. And it's really easy where we live, right?
We people can go next door.
Right, 15 minutes away. But
I'm with you on that. I think leaving isn't the solution.
No.
You don't enact change by leaving. Everyone could get up and leave. If everyone that was a conservative in the state of Washington up and left, they'd probably lose about 40-50% of the population.
Oh, yeah.
But then what?
Right. No, I feel called to stay here and try to make a difference. And I appeal to people to stay here and fight with me. And, I heard a quote the other day that only 42% of Christians vote in our country.
It's actually more so there's a great resource called My Faith Votes. And they do a lot of polling and collect a lot of data. And it's actually more like 1 in 3 that vote consistently.
Wow.
So it's even less, it's probably around 34%.
So we have to own that. We as Christians have to own that. We have to own that.
And we have the power to change.
We do.
We have the power to change culture, and we have the power to put this nation back on track where it was founded in biblical principles.
Absolutely.
And that's where we came from. And it's where are we going? And, when you spoke earlier about that the people are good, the teachers are good in school, but it's the policies that are being passed down from them. Are you familiar with it? I think it was the Stanford prison experiment. There was I think it was the 60s or 70s, and forgive me, I could be wrong. I'm pulling from my memory bank here. But there was a professor who said that you could get a group of good people and you could put them in a state of oppressor, victim, so prisoner, prison guard, and that over time they would forego their values because you're putting people in a position of power over others. And they ended up having to shut the experiment down because they went in one day and a few of the guards had beat up one of the prisoners, but it wasn't even real. It was an experiment. So it was, yes, you are to act this way, and you are to act like you're the prison guard, and you're to act as the prisoner. But it went to the point where they were like, they didn't expect that.
Wow.
But that's what happens when when people in power are given policy to people that are then supposed to live out that policy. And you're giving them policies that say, well, you can't create labels and you have to be diverse and inclusive, but you're achieving the exact opposite of the policy, what the policy is intended to do. You're saying you can't label and so on, but then you by default are now labeling, and you're by default now looking at them differently. Well, can I say this? Can I not say this? Mm-hmm. And that's a slippery slope we go down, because then your educators are afraid to work with a minority, or maybe a black educator is afraid to work with a white kid, and it doesn't work. On paper it may sound good, but in practice you're achieving the exact opposite. It's like if I said to you, don't think of an elephant. You think of an elephant.
Right.
And so that's exactly what happens with these policies. And oftentimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, the legislators that are passing down these policies, they've never taught in education. They've never been a teacher. They didn't serve on a board for 15 years and actually go into the schools and talk to students and get feedback. And they don't know. Yes, they're lending on experiences from the boards and so on, but then divert to the boards and let the boards draft the policy if this is something that's important, and then let the boards draft and work with you, but let them draft that policy and then come back to you and say, in our experiences, and back that up with stats instead of saying, well, we won't get these federal dollars if we don't follow these policies.
Right.
It's just, that's so dangerous. And it's not just dangerous financially, it's dangerous for the kids.
Right.
The kids are who are going to hurt. And they're not just going to hurt in the here and now. They're going to hurt 10, 15 years from now when they're out in the workforce and they still have this mentality that's been really pushed on them through the state educational system.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think we agree on a lot of points. And I think that your experience is vast. And I'm very, very impressed with what you're doing and what you've done. I mean, it's fantastic. It sounds like you've worked in multiple areas, homelessness, education, community, just bringing community together. Yeah. And that to me is really important. I think a lot of people that understand the importance of being able to bridge gaps are going to really love what you're doing and just who you are as a person. I'm very, very impressed.
Well, ultimately, what we've got, our job is to get things done for our citizens, right? And, sometimes that means you have to put aside differences and to work with people. And, you have to stand on your values, but also as a mom with a special needs kiddo, working in those IEP meetings, mm-hmm. individual educational plans, you had to compromise. I have to tell you. And I have my values that are very firm. I wouldn't be here without God. I wouldn't be here without my faith.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that, no doubt. But you also have to figure out a way to make things better. And you can't let, the best, great be the enemy of good. Sometimes you have to inch your way. Mm-hmm. I would, those IEP meetings, man, and it's been almost 10 years now, but I would come in with, I wanted this, right? Mm-hmm. And then, the school would kind of say, well, this is what we think is appropriate. And you'd work. Right. And so hardly ever did I get what I wanted and what I thought was right when I initially started. But we ended up working for something better.
Right.
And we kept that momentum. And that's what I think ultimately as legislators you have to do is you have to say, to think that we're going to nail it, and get like the perfect policy for the next 50 years is, to me, like, that's very prideful, but let's make it better. And I've seen McCleary and all these policies that I'm just like, just make it better. And it's not, I feel like they just keep making it worse. And I don't know what that is, but I do know we have to work together.
Yeah. And I think that, so I've thought a lot about this, why is the system not working fundamentally as it should? And I've just really been convicted that we focus, and this is the Christian conservatives, Christian Republicans, Christian Democrats, we focus so much in politics on winning. What is winning? What does that mean? And who are you winning for? Right. And that's where I've been convicted. And really, this actually was something that I had yesterday come to me in Revelation. I was just really praying and I was like, what is going on? Like, and then I was listening to I don't remember who it was. Someone on the news and they said, this is a win and it just instantly, it was like, that's the problem. We're going for wins. What are we trying to win?
You know what? I'll use an example you were talking about earlier because it made me think of this when you're talking about athletics, right? And inclusion. So if you think of traditional athletics, high achieving basketball team, let's use basketball, right? Great. And I'm a golfer. Like I got a golf scholarship.
Wow.
I'm a high achieving athlete. Right.
Wow.
And I taught golf, for a lot of years too. So I applaud people that have done that and put in dedication. Right. But when I saw this inclusion model, and it's called Unified Sports, and what they do is it's a Special Olympics program, and they take, 3 Special Olympics athletes and then 2, if you want to say neurotypical, non-Special Olympic athletes. Okay. And you make that a team. This beautiful thing happens.
Yeah.
Now, what happened is, and this was at the high school, and I think they still have these programs now, you had kids participating that weren't participating in athletics. So you had what I'd call fringe kids on the fringes that were, not super involved, like in club sports.
They felt like they couldn't be there.
Yeah, because they weren't, I don't know, whatever.
They weren't athletic, or they just I don't
part
fit
of that
in.
Crowd,
yeah, sure.
Right? They were playing along with Special Olympic athletes, and it was a beautiful thing. So guess what? Was the focus on winning?
Nope. Right.
So why have we made it all about winning?
Because that's what the current let's say powers that be think that we care about winning, which when you look at the definition of winning, perhaps we do. But what I mean when I say that is, well, who are we winning for?
Yeah. Winning for who? Are we winning for the citizens?
Or are we winning for your party? Are we winning for who is the win for?
Right.
And to me, I think that winning is okay when you don't forgo your moral values. So, and I think one of the biggest problems that you kind of touched on earlier is there's such an unwillingness to get together, because if I'm a Republican and I sit down with a Democrat, you're evil because you spoke to him. Well, wait, hold on a second. Then how are we ever meant to get anything done? And it's the same for the Democrats. You sat down with him, and he's a Republican, so you're sitting down and you're entertaining bigots and racists. It's like, this doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
How are we ever meant to get anything done? And again, a house divided amongst itself cannot stand, and that's exactly what what we need to overcome.
Yep.
And until politicians grow a spine and say, I have to sit and talk to them.
Yep.
Because oftentimes what I found when I talk in conversations with people is we agree on the issues, but we may not agree on the outcome or the solution. So we agree that there's an issue. We agree that there's an intended outcome, and we disagree on how to get to that outcome. But at least we have a starting point because we all agree that homelessness is not good.
Right.
We all have differences of opinion on how solving homelessness ought to look.
Right.
But at least we agree on the issues. So now we can sit down and have our conversation. Now, that's a more of a cultural and societal issue, I would say, than a moral issue. Now, this is where it gets contested and really heated, is when we disagree on moral issues such as life, then it's a lot harder to sit down and have those conversations because as Christians, we're convicted of this strongly.
Absolutely.
And it's a very hard issue. But you have instances where the legislature are using less than 1% of all abortion cases to justify the other 99% an abortion for convenience, and it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. And I was thinking about my mom when you were just talking earlier about my mom. My husband at the time would kid that he had no idea how she was able to turn right into our driveway to come up our house because she was so far left. And so I love her dearly. I miss her dearly. She passed away eight years ago now. But she was, we sat on different sides of the aisle. And yet so many times we were able to have a conversation about issues and we agreed. We absolutely agreed. But as soon as the whole media, clips or the whatever quotes of the day were that came in, that's where people get divided.
Yeah.
And I feel like we need to push the media aside and we need to not, it just is, it's causing this frenzy of divisiveness that is hurting us as individuals and human beings. And so I think we need to look at that and go, is this helping or hurting?
Right.
And when it's hurting us, we need to push it aside and go, let's talk. Let's talk humanely and humanly. I respect you as a human being. I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. Let's talk about the issue and let's figure out how we can get to a better solution for our citizens. That should be the top, our citizens in our state, who we represent. And that should be the defining purpose. I was talking to somebody else about this yesterday about our school system, and it's the Nordstrom model. The students should be at the top, right? Our teachers are right next to the students.
It's the trickle up.
Right.
Yeah.
And the school boards are down here below, right? And then the superintendents, because as a school board, you have one employee, that's a superintendent. And then you have all the other employees, and then you have the teachers that are right next to the students, and then you have the students. It all should be about outcomes for students and what's making their lives better. Same in the legislature, same in our political world. The citizen is the top.
Yep.
Right? Our voter and our citizens. To me, the voters are right next to citizens because we know not everybody votes, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you have the PCOs, the precinct committee officers. They're right below that because they're supposed to represent their neighborhoods, to the parties, right? To the GOP or to the Democratic parties. And then you have our county, our GOP, they're supposed to support that. And then you have our state, our county, our city, officials. And, then you have down here somewhere the governor, and you have our Congress, and then you have the president. It all should be supporting the citizens.
Right.
That should be the top, right? Not the other way around where it's the governor that's the top and it's this trickle down approach.
Yeah, and like you said, with the mandates and just really, the power was in the state legislature's hand to tell him, hey, your time's up. Like, we are there. And the legislature failed the people. Where were they? People were like, I need to go back to work. And it's not just an economical thing, it's a mental thing.
Absolutely.
People that get locked up for long periods of time, it doesn't do them well. They might not be locked up like they are in prison, but it's not the same. They might not be locked up like they are in prison, but it's almost the same thing. Because even though you're in your home and it might be comfortable and you might have Netflix, you can only watch Netflix for so long.
No.
You can only watch TV for so long before, like, my wife is very, very active. I work in front of a computer. So for me, I can sit for long periods. It doesn't bother me. She can sit for an hour. And then she's like, well, I could go do this. And she's up and off. And it was torture for her.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really bad for her. She really struggled and you can only do, hey, it was great for chores around the house and in the yard, but there's only so many of those you can do.
Right.
It seems like they always pile up when you've got a lot of other things going on, but when that's all you can focus on, then they get done real fast. So it wasn't just, of course, there was a financial aspect of it, but people needed to get back to work, not just for financial reasons, but also for their mental health.
Absolutely.
And the family health, because people, I've heard instances where people who were really kind of apart prior to COVID actually mended relationships. And I've heard the exact opposite, that
Right.
there's, and that's just characteristics of us humans. Some of us do better where we're around people for shorter periods of time, and others do better with more of that. So that was very dangerous.
It was, and it was very concerning, especially to me. What I heard about were our students, that to me, these mandates were on the backs of our students. I felt like they were affected the most, and we still don't know really what all the damage that was done, the mental health struggles that will ensue because of what the lockdowns did. I have friends that said, my kids have just struggled since the lockdowns. Like they had anxiety before, but now they have so much anxiety. And that's one friend. I have another friend whose son has autism and has not been able to go back to school because there was a transition into a different school and has not, I think they're starting to work through it now, but it's taken months. And the mental health aspects of this, I really do, like the masking and the lockdowns hurt our kids the worst. I really do believe that. And I don't have the words to express how concerned I was, how concerned I am for their mental health. And I do believe there was so much of this that was done recklessly, quite honestly. And we've never done things like that.
Right.
We've never quarantined healthy people.
And I think the craziest thing to me was that even in the face of opposing data and in the face of other scientists coming out and saying, hey, these things like the masks don't work, they still put their foot on the gas and just said, nope, we're doing it. Because what's the alternative? We say we were wrong. So then say you were wrong.
Yeah.
Just say you were wrong. Hey, we thought this would help. It didn't help. We're sorry. We really are trying to do what's best for the most people that we can. But hey, the masks don't work, so don't worry about it unless you have an N95 mask, and even that's in dispute. So why continue to push that agenda? Well, it's because they are so prideful that they don't want to say we were wrong.
It's hard to know why they're doing it, quite honestly.
Right.
I can't get in that mind frame.
Right.
I really can't. I think ultimately what we have to do is we have to totally limit our governor's emergency powers to 30 days at the minimum, right? Or maybe even less.
Maximum.
Thank you. Sorry, at the maximum. 30 days. No.
Maximum for
30 days, no more. And if it goes beyond that, we have to have our full legislature come back, because we need to hear from the people. Because unfortunately, and we know from history, we know what has been done during states of emergencies, the grievous personal and crimes against humanity that have been done.
Yep.
And we need to learn from those, right? And no different. We have a governor that is going, I don't know what it is. It's over 800 days. Still in a state of emergency, and yet 2 months ago, him and his lieutenant governor went on vacation. That's a state of emergency? And it blows me away. So we have to, and it is on the legislature. You're right. They passed the law that allowed this to happen.
Yep.
We have to get it back. And there's the initiatives to the legislature. There's 11 initiatives right now that, if passed by the legislature, will be put into law because they cannot be vetoed by the governor. And one of those is the state of emergency that limits his powers to 30 days. And I am 100% behind that.
Good. And I'm praying for that too. So there's been an interesting, we talked a little bit about life. And so I'm just going to read the issue of life from the survey. It's question 4 on the survey. It says, God created man in his image. The duty of civil government is the protection of innocent human life from the conception until natural death. The issue application is that Washington State's reproductive privacy rights laws allow minors to obtain abortions without parental consent. Additionally, this law requires taxpayer-funded abortions on demand. Late-term abortions are legal throughout all 9 months of pregnancy in the state of Washington because of the vague way that viability is defined in this law. And our response is that the reproductive privacy rights law needs to be challenged and or repealed at both the state and local levels. You responded to 10, which was strongly agree, and you had commented, to clarify, I agree with the response that the reproductive privacy rights law in Washington needs to be repealed. Now, this couldn't be more important now because the Roe v. Wade is so up in arms right now in the Supreme Court. We don't know what ruling they're going to pass down. And so I'm going to kind of throw a hypothetical at you. So if the Supreme Court say, well, this is actually, we're going to divert this back to the states, and this is actually a state issue, not a federal issue, and a bill comes into the legislature at the state level that essentially mimics Roe v. Wade, how are you going to fight against even the current law and then also the application of Roe v. Wade for abortion in all 9 months of pregnancy? Where do you stand on that issue?
I believe in the sanctity of life, and I believe that it starts from conception. You know, God says in his word that he knew us in our mother's womb, and he, wonderfully made us. Mm-hmm. And I believe in that. And I've believed in it more and more as I've lived, and I've learned to honor the creature he's made me, you know, our uniqueness. Life is beautiful. And so I will do everything I can to protect that and to fight for that. And we've come a long way in our country away from that. And I don't blame people. Like, I think people are trying to do the best they can, and people get on different sides of this issue. Mm-hmm. And again, I try not to, it's all about grace, right? Like I'm not going to blame people. They're seeing things, but I see it differently. I believe God has given us that life, and it's precious. Right. And we have got to protect that. Just like a mother protects their baby, mm-hmm. right? When it's born or their unborn baby, no mm-hmm. matter, like that is, to me, we've got to protect that with everything in us, with our laws, our policies, to protect that life. That is precious from the moment it's conceived. And that's true on the other end of this too. We've had laws that are attacking end of life as well. That mm-hmm. was they tried to pass in the legislature. So I will do everything I can to fight for that. I know we've got laws right now that don't align with that. Mm-hmm. And we need to fight against those, and I will. Right.
And so you would have some people that say, well, what about in the instances of incest, rape, and so on? What's your stance on that specifically?
That one's tougher, right? And I've heard those stories. I have mm-hmm. friends that have those stories. And I don't know, but I think you said it well earlier, is that the legislature is using maybe 1% of the situations like that to make these decisions for, 99% of the people that aren't using it in those situations. That one becomes so much more complex. Mm-hmm. And I honestly, I don't know, because I want to protect that life, and I believe in protecting that life, and I believe in God's grace. I have a son with special needs. I have a son that has autism. I didn't expect that. There's the test that you can do to decide that tells you if your son's going to have, or your child's going to have disabilities. Yep. Those are very challenging decisions for people to make. I have a friend that knew their son was going to be born and probably not live moments, because it was so deformed or so not formed, mm-hmm. and they still chose to have it. And those are challenging questions. Like, mm-hmm. I don't, I think, first of all, let's get the law for the majority back to protecting life. And then let's look at these situations and figure out what's best. Because, I mean, when you're talking about incest,
you can't put yourself in that position. I mean, it's so hard. Yeah. And rape too. And and I agree with you. And I'm glad that you say you don't know, because it's just such a different, we have never been in that position. I don't know that you haven't, but I assume that you haven't. But I've never been in that position. And, you know, I've gone back and forth many times on this issue in my mind and just prayerfully been like, how do I even navigate this issue? And I just asked the Lord, like, where should I stand here?
Yeah.
Because it's such a difficult one. And again, I don't know, because it's so harmful. Like, hey, you know, a woman's raped, and you're dealing with that. And then 2 months later, you find out you're pregnant. And it's like, how do you even handle that?
Yeah.
And it's just so hard. And I've come to the conclusion that that's between them and the Lord. And, you know, it's such a hard one. But yes, you know, it's less than 1% of all abortions are for these purposes. And the other comment I would make is that these are things that are testable. Like you said, you know, when women are raped and they have claimed to be raped, we have a rape kit that they do at the hospital to you can determine how these things are done. And you can determine whether a child is of the same gene pool. So these are tests that can be done quickly and verifiably. And then therefore, if there is a question of, well, you know, hey, I want an abortion and it's only legal in those instances, then they would have to be able to prove that these things did happen. But they are verifiable. And because I've heard people say, well, how would you verify that? Well, they are verifiable.
Yeah.
You know, we can verify these things. And and it doesn't need to be public knowledge. It doesn't need to be out there for all to know. But using less than 1% of all cases of abortion to justify abortion on demand and for convenience is it's just abhorrent to me. I don't understand it.
Absolutely.
And it's damaging. And this is what people don't understand. It's damaging not just to the child, but to the mother too.
Absolutely.
I have not met one person who has had an abortion and that has been joyful about it.
Yeah.
It's more regret and shame and all these things. And it's, you know, we're there to say, as Christians, we're there to say, hey, it's okay. Like, you can give this to the Lord. You can give this to the Lord. Your life isn't over. You are still loved. And by his grace, he will grant you that grace.
Yeah.
But it's just the damage that's done is so incalculable.
Yeah.
People carry it with them for the rest of their lives, really.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, the other thing I would say about this is that, you know, I'm 49 years old, and the longer I live, the more I learn that things are not black and white.
Right. There's
way more gray area. And, you know, I never thought I'd be divorced, honestly. Mm. And after 28 years of marriage, I'm single, and yet I know God loves me, right? Mm-hmm. He loves me, and he doesn't hold that against me. Right. And who am I to say, you know, any sin is greater than another? It's not. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to focus so much more on God's grace. Thankfully for his good. I mean, I just can't say that enough, right? So that's the biggest thing to me is, number one, we need to lead with God's grace.
Yes.
Like there is not one sin above another, right? And I believe in the sanctity of life, and I think we have to have policies that have those mm-hmm. values at their forefront, right? But we also need to have that grace with people and humans, because we don't have enough of that in our mm-hmm. world. We don't have enough love, right? And love people. And just know that there are gray areas, and we may not be able to figure it all out, you know, today or in the next year. But if we can start inching closer towards what God, the richness of his life that he has. He said he came to give us life and mm-hmm. and have it more abundantly. I'm searching for that, you know. Mm-hmm. I want that for everybody. Right. I want that for people that have had abortions. I want that for people that, you know, are considering it, mm-hmm. you know, or that are in those situations that are awful. And again, I have friends, you know, that mm-hmm. have had those situations, and I don't know what that's like. But I believe in a God that has that much grace and mercy for us. And he does promise to work all things together for our good. He mm-hmm. doesn't say just the good things. He says all things. And I have stood on that in the hardest times of my life. When my mom passed away suddenly, she was my best friend. And I thought, and that was the scripture he gave me, honestly, because I knew he could heal. I've seen him heal before. He miraculously healed my father-in-law when he was on his deathbed, and the chaplain had been in there, and he healed him, and we stood on it. And so when my mom got sick and stage 4 cancer, and, I'm like, all right, God, I'm grabbing the healing scriptures, and I felt something, and I'm like, oh, whoa, what is going on? And God gave me that wisdom to know, that foresight to know she wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, God, then you got to give me something to stand on.
Yeah.
And he gave me that scripture, Romans 8:28. And it has come to pass through something that was awful and not what we wanted, and absolutely the opposite of what I'd hoped for.
Right.
He brought beauty out of it. And that's what he promises. And that's the other thing I know about God. And, but I also realize that people that are making some of these hard decisions in life don't necessarily know that.
Right.
They don't know that beautiful love that God
They've
has
heard
for
of
us.
Jesus, but they don't truly know who he
Or
is.
they see him as a judgmental God, right?
Well, he is.
Right,
We're all judged, so he is a judgmental God. However, we are saved by his grace through faith. So
not by works.
Not by
That's
works.
right.
So I would say that I would agree with you to an extent that there is gray area, but I think there are fundamental things that are black and white, and they're given to us in Scripture, and that really are not just cannot be contested. So I would agree with you to an extent that there are gray areas. There's definitely gray areas in law because laws are given by man, but I think that when we talk about moral law, there's really no gray area there. For me, I just God's law, the moral law, it is what it is. He's the creator of all things, and that those laws, to me, there's just really no gray.
Right. And Dale, let me clarify. I want to make sure that that I'm not misconstrued in this. Is that I definitely still believe in the sanctity of life from conception.
Right. And I didn't get that you were saying otherwise. I just wanted to clarify that.
But those situations that we were talking about, I think those are ones that we're going to have to figure out, prayerfully and gracefully, and try to figure out a way to navigate that that's in a humane way.
Right. Yeah. Without casting people down.
Exactly.
I mean, we Christians are some of the worst at this. We judge and we condemn and we, you ought not to be doing this. And it's like, but hey, what about grace?
Exactly.
Let's talk to this person and see where they are and see what they need. And there are plenty of organizations out there. Churches are fantastic at this, and have been forever.
Absolutely.
The pillars of our community that it's like, hey, just invite your buddy to go to church with you. Yeah. You never know what will happen. I have a friend who is I would say he's probably more agnostic, and he's been helping me here in the studio, and it's given me an opportunity to witness to him that I would probably not otherwise have had, because these are conversations that he typically tries to avoid. I don't. I want to have these conversations, and I want to challenge him. But just him agreeing to help me and come here is, to me, I'm like, Lord, this is such a good opportunity. Like, let's work this. So yesterday we were in here setting up, and he brought something up. I didn't bring it up. We were working, and he just said, well, what about this? And then we just started chatting, and it just gave me that in, and I just said, hey, this is where I stand. This is where I think it is. And I'm just, I'm waiting for the next opportunity where he's thinking and he's curious. So we need to just meet people where they're at, and we need to be firm. Like, there is a creator. He did create everything, and he did give us moral law, and we should uphold that moral law. But if we slip, we know that there is grace. But also I will say that as Christians, especially if you do know who he is, you ought not you ought not use his grace as justification for doing something.
Right.
So that's where I say there's no real gray area there. If you really truly know him and know who you are. Before I was a Christian, there were things that I did, and I look back on and go, man, God does not like that. And I should not have done that. And that was wrong of me. And then I go to him and I say, hey, I need your forgiveness for that. And though I didn't know you and I didn't know better, it was still wrong. And so we ought not use the knowledge of his grace as justification for committing sin or going against his word. So I just wanted to clarify that. I didn't get the impression by any means that you were saying otherwise. I just wanted to touch in on that. And so just real quick, we're going to finish on life here. And so we saw issue 4 on the survey, part B, the issue application in January 2022, a new law went into effect in Washington State allowing minors to obtain gender reassignment treatment and surgery without parental consent, SB 5904. Another corresponding bill forbids insurance companies from denying coverage for these procedures and further forbids insurance companies from notifying policyholders, i.e. the parents, of this coverage. And our response is that this new initiative should be repealed and or resisted because it is an affront to the integrity of life as God created it, male and female, and in his image. And you responded a 10, strongly agree. And you said that you agree with repealing the law. And just real quick, you know, how damaging is it really that we tell these kids, going back to education, that we're telling these kids, you can be, as a boy, you can be a girl, and as a girl, you can be a boy. I mean, these kids, you know, we have a little 5-year-old grandson, and he wants to be Elsa from Frozen one day and he wants to be Batman the next day because he's, you know, seeing these things and they're these fantasy. And it's like, you can't, and, you know, I had to really sit down with him one day and say, hey, I need you to understand that these things aren't real, that, you know, you are a boy and that's all, you cannot be anything other than a boy. It's just how it is, how God created you. And so how damaging is it when we tell kids that, hey, at 6, 7 years old, you can be a girl if you want to be a girl?
I think the questioning is harmful. I think that's what I'm concerned about. You know, I grew up on a farm. I grew up playing with tractors. I grew up playing with dirt, in the dirt a lot. I ate a lot of dirt. I ate a lot of mud pies, you know, and I worry, like, today, would a teacher say, well, you know, and Mary Jo, that's my full name. That's what they called me when I was younger. Mm-hmm. You know, well, maybe you're not a girl. You know, maybe you're really a boy. That questioning is what's really troubling. Nobody said that to me then.
Right.
You know, I was just a tomboy, right? You know, I was,
and that's why I think even when I grew up, it was, she's just a tomboy.
Yeah, you know, and like playing with tractor. My dad was a farmer, and, you know, I loved the tractors. I loved being out there with them. But now where we're bringing in the question, and we're bringing that question into these impressionable brains and minds, I don't, because I haven't researched it, I can't even imagine the damage that is doing, because we know that children thrive on security, right? We know the security of the family, the security of a home. I mean, there's all these research done about how many times you move and how many times they have to change school. And like all of that contributes to, you know, can contribute to the mental health challenges or traumas or, you know, right? Like we know that. There's
a whole new level of layer, and a whole new layer on top of those things.
And I've heard from friends that are teachers in preschool where they are, they have to honor what the parent is calling the child when it's a different gender from what the child is. And you have a kid coming to school crying who's a girl who just wants to be a girl, but the parents are calling it a boy's name, and this child is so confused. And it's just, there's so much, you know, parents have the right to do what they see fit, but we need laws to prohibit, to protect our youngest in our societies from this onslaught that is, you know, can question. To me, how is that not grooming?
It absolutely is.
We talk about that, and you can't do certain things in the workplace, you know, yet we can do. And so, not that is being done here. I'm not saying it is, but without a law that prohibits or a policy. And I think a school district could have this policy. Maybe I'm wrong, but I applaud what Florida has done and that they have said K through third grade, you cannot talk about sexual identity or any other kind of orientation or whatever.
And why would you want to as a teacher anyway?
Right. But
this is an uncomfortable conversation between you and your child. Never mind other people's children.
We need to, and I agree that needs to be protected, because even though we may not have a policy that says they should do it or they should be teaching certain things, it doesn't prohibit a person from taking that initiative. And we have to protect that. So it is, I don't even know how damaging it is, but I can only guess. I'm very concerned about this. We'll find
out in the next 20 years after we've had 20 years of this.
And you have cases of people, of adults now that said, don't let this happen because I regret making those decisions, even though I was 18 and I changed, my gender. And now, 5-10 years later, the damage that did to me, obviously not all people feel like that. And I honor,
it is a large majority though, in the studies that have been done, it is a large majority.
Yeah. And I'm not here to judge anybody. Again, this
teenagers,
is MJ. I love people, right? I do. I love people and I honor where they're at. I'm not trying to judge, but I think where we need to have laws protecting this, and being a minor is way too young to have that ability to make that decision on their own without parental consent. That should not be.
Well, and then the next, so section B2 is that it's an assault on parental rights and responsibilities to direct, provide, and pay the medical care of their children. And that was also strongly agreed 10. And you just said absolutely. And I think you touched on that too. And I think it's important to distinguish, we're talking about a child can walk in and get gender altering surgery and hormone blockers, and the doctor can't tell anyone. But what happens when the bill comes from the insurance company? Because they say, well, the insurance company can't tell the parent, but they're going to find out once they get the bill. So how do you so you're still I don't understand. It doesn't, to me, make sense in my mind. Someone's paying. So does that mean that the state are just going to pay for it then? So there's so many questions that I have where the law doesn't make sense and it's not clear to me in my reading of it. And hey, if someone out there can tell me, I would love for someone to fill me in on this, because it just does not make sense to me. And I would say that it is the issue isn't only about them. I mean, this is the bigger issue for sure. The issue of being able to go and get this gender bending surgery and so on. But the issue is now we're talking about compelled speech. So you're telling someone that is publicly funded how they ought to respond to a child and how they ought to. Now, I'm not saying obviously there are parameters in place for discipline and so on. What I'm saying is you're telling someone, an individual person who is a man or a woman, that they have to say that a boy is a girl and a girl is a boy, that it goes against truth, and you're compelling them to do this. And that goes against our right to free speech. So
great point.
Where's the line here? At what point are we foregoing our constitutional rights to adhere to public policy? I mean, to me, it's the Constitution, then the law, then policy. And if the law trumps the policy, you follow the law. And if the Constitution trumps the law, you follow the Constitution.
Absolutely.
That's how it was intended to be. Absolutely. And what we're saying is, no. It doesn't matter what the Constitution says. You have to do what our policy says. And until someone has the fervor to stand up against that and take that to court, which is very expensive, and so a lot of people don't, then they just say, oh, okay. And so this is dangerous, very dangerous territory on both fronts.
Absolutely. And I think you nailed it, right? We've just seen a gross departure from our Constitution, our constitutional rights. And we're seeing this in multiple areas. And you bring up a good one. I hadn't even thought of that, I'll be honest, about that part of this, about the free speech, and hadn't even considered that. So that's another piece of this where it doesn't, I mean, like you said, with the insurance company paying for this and the parents having to foot the bill, the difference between, well, paying the insurance and then whatever's left over that the insurance didn't pay, like this, it doesn't make sense. And that's what's happening. We've left our morals and we've left our founding documents, and we're traversing into this land of where is common sense? There is none. It's like the police reform bills. It's crimes doubled in a year.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. So we've got to fight to bring that back. And I just would appeal to people to pray. I have these, what I've been asking for, I have these wristband bands. I've made these instead of buttons because my son loves wristbands. If you look at my son, he has like a 10. And I'm like, well, we'll do wristbands. And they're all right. People are like, yeah, okay. But now I'm like 2 weeks ago, I'm like, God's like, ask people to pray. Put them on their wrist and ask people to pray. Not just for MJ. This is way bigger than MJ's campaign, but for all of our officials, for our districts, for our counties, for our states, like we are at this precipice in time that, in fact, that's what I feel. I feel like we have to draw this line and we have to say no more. You are not going to take any more ground. We are going to fight, and we need everybody to be praying and seeking God. And that he will turn back, right? And turn back to our nation. And we become these people that believe in God again and believe that he can do this, number one, which he can. He said it is finished, right? So we got to pray from that victory ground and pray for our judges, pray for our governor, our president, our state officials, our county and city officials, our school board members, that they can see clearly the truth, because the enemy's taking ground.
Yeah.
And it obviously, clearly in our policies, and we have got to say enough. And honestly, again, we have to own this.
Yes, we do.
We have allowed this to happen. And we got comfortable. I got comfortable in our cushy world and with the plethora of blessings that we have. And we let this happen on our watch. And now it's time to go to battle and reclaim this ground.
I agree. I completely agree. Well, I think on that note, we will wrap up. And if you just want to let people know where they can find you, where they can contact you, and I just wish you all the best on your campaign.
Thanks, Dale. You can go to electmjbolt.com. That's my website. And you can, I've got a lot of other issues that we haven't talked about today laid out there. I'm definitely a very conservative individual. I believe in our constitutional freedoms and rights. I believe in parental rights. One of the things we didn't talk about with education is that I believe in choice as well. I believe that we need to allow for school choice, because we've got to let the free market system work on our education system. That is the only way it is going to be better for the whole, for everybody, right? And I have other issues laid out there as well. So electmjbolt.com. You can also email me at electmjbolt@gmail.com. And happy to talk with any of your viewers. Obviously, faith is a big part of my life, as I've shared a little bit, and I plan on that. That's what's going to guide me. I believe it's given me a lot of discernment already in policy when I'm looking at things, and I'm able to kind of peel back the layers and kind of go, what's at the root here? What's at the root issue? What do we really need to be looking at? And I feel like I've been very effective that way, and I've been an effective advocate that way. And I have a lot of rapport with people because I do listen, and I listen to all sides. And then, using that discernment and wisdom God has given me, I'm able to say, hey, let's, this is what I think we need to tackle, or here's, part of the solution, and get a lot of people that, agree with me, or, we continue to have those conversations. So appreciate people reaching out. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you, Dale, and get to know you a little more, and also your viewers through We Believe We Vote. I believe this is a great organization. I appreciate what you guys are doing.
And thanks for coming on. electmjbolt.com. Thanks.
Thanks, Dale.
All right, bye.